Ever get that feeling where you're circling a problem, you know there's something deeper driving it, but you just can't quite put your finger on it?
Yeah, like your unconscious mind is sort of holding the keys, right?
Exactly. And, well, that's the territory we're exploring today. We're doing a deep dive into advanced conversational hypnosis, ACH for short.
Mm-hmm. It's a really fascinating way of looking at how we can understand and, maybe more importantly, shift those deep-seated unconscious patterns, the ones often at the root of our issues.
Right. And I think most people, when they hear hypnosis, they probably picture, the swing and watch or maybe stage shows.
Sure, or they might know a bit about traditional techniques, direct suggestions, that kind of thing.
But ACH sounds like, well, something different, more contemporary, maybe more subtle.
That's a good way to put it. It really moves beyond those formal structures. It's much more about the power dynamic within the conversation itself.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack advanced conversational hypnosis. And we want to understand it by comparing it, contrasting it a bit with traditional ericksonian hypnosis.
And we've got some great source material to guide us, drawing directly from the work of a prominent ACH trainer, Virginie. She really clarifies the core ideas.
Perfect. So this should give everyone listening a really solid grasp of this approach, whether it's for personal insight or, professional interest. We'll be touching on things like, what is conversational hypnosis? What's this hypnotic interview she talks about?
And those unconscious moments, they sound crucial. Plus, how ACH views things like session prep, suggestibility, even marketing for therapists. She covers a lot of ground, often answering questions practitioners frequently ask.
Gives us a real peek behind the curtain then.
Definitely.
Okay, let's jump right in.
Hmm.
Based on Virginie work, what is conversational hypnosis at its core? What's the big idea?
Well, she frames it as a really advanced evolution, you could say. It moves away from needing pre-written scripts
Right, no script.
or those really formal induction processes. It even de-emphasizes digging deep into the client's past history in a structured way or relying on specific named techniques for everything.
Okay, so that immediately sounds, well, pretty different from the standard picture of hypnotherapy. How does that actually play out in a session? What's the practical difference?
I think the biggest shift is the immediacy. The therapeutic interaction starts like right away.
Not after some relaxation countdown.
Exactly. Traditional methods often have that distinct phase, induce hypnosis first, then maybe work on the problem. ACH weaves the therapy into the conversation from the very beginning.
How? What's the focus then, if not inducing trance right off the bat?
The initial focus is intense curiosity. It's about understanding the client's unique way of thinking, their specific thoughts, their beliefs, the conclusions they've drawn that actually create and maintain the problem. It's less about tackling the symptom head-on initially.
Okay, so you're exploring the structure of the problem first.
Precisely. Imir even uses this phrase, mini sessions within a single session.
Mini sessions.
Yeah, it highlights how fluid it is. The therapy unfolds naturally within the dialogue, responding moment to moment rather than following a rigid, preset path.
That paints a very different picture.
Yeah.
Dynamic, responsive, and she outlines some core principles behind this, right? 10 of them?
Yes, 10 core principles. And a really foundational one is about detaching completely from preconceived notions of what hypnosis should look like.
Letting go of expectations.
Absolutely. Being open to how it emerges uniquely for each person. Another really interesting one is how to handle pressure in the session.
Pressure, like feeling stuck or the client pushing for an answer.
Yeah, either kind. The principle is, if you feel pressure, get more curious. Don't try to force something. Step back, ask more questions. Pressure is a signal that something needs more understanding, not more effort.
That's counterintuitive, but makes a lot of sense. Pressure usually shuts things down. What else stands out from those principles?
A big one is the belief that clients inherently have their own solutions. The therapist isn't there to hand them answers.
But to help them find their own.
Exactly. Facilitate their discovery. And, maybe surprisingly, she calls hypnosis itself the icing on the cake.
The icing, so it's not the main event.
It suggests the real work, the transformation, happens through the deeper understanding gained in the conversation, the insights. Hypnosis enhances that process. It makes it stick, maybe, but it's not the only tool or even the primary driver in her view.
Wow, icing on the cake. That really reframes things. So if you're not starting with symptoms or inductions, where does ACH begin? You mentioned the hypnotic interview.
Yes, absolutely. Imir sees the hypnotic interview as the crucial first stage. It's job one.
And its goal isn't just gathering information.
No, it goes much deeper than the presenting problem. It's about understanding the underlying issue by mapping out the client's specific way of thinking about it, their thoughts, beliefs, conclusions.
So less what's wrong and more how do you do this problem? What's the internal recipe?
That's a great way to put it. And the therapist's stance during this? Extreme curiosity, genuinely wanting to understand.
Asking questions that might even seem a bit detached.
Sometimes, yeah. Because the aim is an immediate comfort, it's facilitating the client's own exploration, helping them see the mental framework that's keeping the problem going.
And there's a core question the therapist keeps in mind.
Yes. According to Imir, it's essentially, what does this client need to think to create and maintain this specific problem?
Well, they need to think. Huh.
If you understand that underlying logic, that thought process, then you can help shift it. You're getting to the root, not just trimming the leaves.
Puts the client right in the middle of their own understanding process. Now, earlier you mentioned unconscious moments. Tell me more about those. What are they?
Ah, yes, unconscious moments, UMs. They're fascinating and really central to ACH. Imir describes them as these subtle, often really brief emotional or physical responses.
Like what, specifically?
Could be tiny things. A slight shift in posture, a change in breathing you almost miss, a little hesitation, a fleeting facial expression, something that hints at an emotion just below the surface.
Things that might easily get glossed over in a more structured session.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
In a script-based approach, you might just push past them, but in ACH, these are seen as gold. Nuggets of unconscious information, she calls them.
Nuggets. Okay, so you don't ignore them.
Definitely not. You notice them, you acknowledge them, you might explore them gently. The therapist pays close attention to the words the client uses right before and after a UM. Those words often hold important clues.
Okay, so you spot the UM, you note the surrounding words. Then what? How do you actually use that moment?
Well, one surprisingly effective technique is just gently repeating a key word or phrase the client used right around the UM.
Just repeating it.
Yeah. Imir suggests this acts as a subtle but powerful suggestion or insight for the client. It helps them connect dots unconsciously without the therapist having to spell it out. It's like holding up a mirror to the unconscious mind just as it surfaces.
Like a little nudge for their own insight. And didn't you mention a formula connected to this? ABSURD.
Yes, the ABSURD formula. It's laid out as the kind of 6-stage protocol within ACH specifically for working with these UMs to deepen the change process.
Okay, ABSURD. What does it stand for?
Right, it's an acronym. A is for attention getting the client focused. B is for bypass the conscious mind, creating that space for unconscious processing. S is for stimulate the unconscious mind, often leading to these UMs.
Got it. ABS.
Then U is crucial. Utilize the UMs as they arise. Pay attention to the responses. R is for raise the trance, which here means deepening that internal focus naturally. And D is direct unconscious attention towards resolution, towards positive shifts.
Attention bypass, stimulate, utilize, raise, direct. Okay, that provides a clear structure for leveraging those subtle moments. Now, let's connect this back. How does ACH relate to, say, Milton Erickson's work? He's such a huge figure in hypnosis.
Oh, absolutely. Imir is very clear about the lineage. ACH definitely builds on core Ericksonian principles, things like incredibly keen observation skills.
Noticing everything.
Right, paying attention to those tiny subconscious cues, and Erickson's concept of utilization, working with whatever the client brings, their language, their metaphors, even their resistance.
So that foundation is there.
Yeah, definitely. The training in ACH actively cultivates those skills: deep listening, spotting nonverbal communication, leveraging what the client offers. It honors that Ericksonian foundation.
But it also diverges, right? You mentioned earlier it moves away from some things. What are the key differences from a more traditional Ericksonian approach?
Probably the most significant is the intentional move away from using complex Ericksonian language patterns.
Like the indirect suggestions, metaphors, embedded commands.
Exactly. While Erickson was a master of that, ACH generally aims for interaction that feels more direct, more transparent, less overtly suggestive language. The focus is on clarity and genuine curiosity, not crafting intricate hypnotic sentences. It sounds more, well, conversational.
Which fits the name conversational hypnosis. Makes sense.
Oh,
What about session preparation? Is that different too?
Yeah, quite different often. ACH really champions minimal prep. The idea is to go in with an open mind, ready to be guided by the client in the moment. Instead of, say, spending hours writing detailed scripts, planning specific inductions, or choosing metaphors beforehand, which can happen in some Ericksonian-influenced approaches, ACH is much more emergent.
Less pre-planning, more presence and responsiveness. Got it. What about suggestibility tests? Do you test if someone is hypnotizable first in ACH?
Generally, no. Imir argues they're unnecessary in ACH.
Why is that?
The thinking is that accessing the unconscious happens naturally through the process of the hypnotic interview itself. As the client explores their problem and their thinking, they naturally enter states where unconscious processing occurs.
Yeah.
So you don't need a separate test up front.
Okay, that's a fundamentally different view of how it works.
Uh-huh.
This all shapes the therapist role then. It sounds less like being the expert fixer.
Exactly right. The therapist in ACH is positioned as a facilitator, a guide for the client's own exploration and insight, not the problem solver imposing solutions. The belief is the client has the resources within them.
So the therapist's job is to help unlock those resources.
Precisely. To create the right conditions for the client's self-discovery.
And how do they do that? What are the key skills in action?
It comes down to 100% attention. Really listening, not just to the words, but the nonverbals too. Asking those open-ended, curious questions we talked about, guiding the client's exploration.
And importantly.
And importantly, consciously avoiding putting their own ideas, interpretations, or solutions onto the client. It's about empowering the client's own process.
The guide, not the guru. Okay, now, trance. It's the word everyone associates with hypnosis.
Yeah.
How does ACH view trance?
It's seen quite differently, not as a specific state you have to force or induce, more like a natural byproduct.
The byproduct of what?
Of untangling the knots of the problem through the questioning, through exploring those unconscious moments. As the client focuses inward, processes things differently, makes new connections, that state of focused internal attention, that's the trance. It emerges from the work.
So it's a result, not a prerequisite.
Yeah.
Interesting. She also talks about shaping the trance. What does that mean practically?
Shaping the trance involves using what she calls process instructions. These are usually short, direct, but gentle statements.
Right.
Like if a client shows a flicker of emotion, the therapist might say, just notice that feeling, or stay with that sensation for a moment. They're designed to amplify or encourage the internal processing that's already happening naturally based on those UMs.
So you're gently steering their awareness towards their own internal experience.
Exactly. Nudging the natural process along rather than using a formal induction script.
Okay. So insights emerge, changes start happening.
Yeah.
How do you make sure it sticks? Tell me about testing and integration.
Yeah, the testing phase is considered really vital in ACH. It's about checking the robustness of the change, making sure it's solid, reducing the chance of relapse.
How do you test it?
It involves actively probing the client's response to the original problem. Imir mentions different types of situational tests, like imagining triggering scenarios.
See how they react now.
Right. Emotional tests, checking the feeling associated with the problem now, and even ridiculous tests, presenting unlikely scenarios to see how deeply ingrained the change is.
Ridiculous tests. I like that. Sounds like it could really challenge the change. And the dynamic during testing is unique too, you said.
Yes, this is key. It's kind of reversed from what you might expect. It's not the therapist trying to convince the client they're better.
It's the client convincing the therapist.
Exactly. The client is encouraged to really try and persuade the therapist that the change is real, solid, lasting. Any hesitation or doubt from the client becomes more grist for the mill, more to explore. The client validates their own change.
They really own it then.
Yeah.
Okay, and after testing comes integration.
Yes. This is about cementing the changes. It can involve conscious tasking, maybe small actions or reflections for the client to do consciously.
Reinforce the new way of thinking you're feeling.
Right. And Imir also talks about sleep tasking, using the unconscious mind's processing power during sleep to continue integrating the insights from the session, making sure that changes take root deeply.
That covers all the bases, conscious and unconscious. Now, Imir also tackles some common challenges or maybe misconceptions in therapy, like marketing. Why does she think traditional therapy marketing often, well, misses the mark?
Her point is that therapists often market using jargon or abstract concepts, root causes, inner child, specific modalities.
Things clients might not relate to directly?
Exactly. Clients usually search for help based on their symptoms. I have anxiety, I can't sleep, I lack confidence. They're not usually thinking, I need stemotherapy.
Right, they're focused on the pain point. So what does she suggest?
She calls it symptom marketing. Basically, speak the client's language. Address their conscious struggles directly in your marketing. Show you understand their specific problem and can offer a solution for that. Meet them where they are.
Makes total sense. Connect with their immediate reality. What about unconscious resistance? That's a common therapy concept. How's it viewed in ACH?
It's not seen as something to fight against or overcome. Resistance is treated as valuable information
Information about what?
about what the resistance might be protecting, what underlying fear or need it represents. So you work with it, get curious about it, understand its function, rather than trying to bulldoze through it. It's a guidepost.
So resistance isn't the client being difficult, it's a clue. Interesting shift. And homework. Some therapists give lots, some none. What's the ACH take?
Generally, IMIR leans towards minimizing or even eliminating formal homework.
Really, why?
The reasoning is, if the core issue is truly resolved and integrated unconsciously during the session, constant conscious homework shouldn't be needed to maintain the change. The goal is deep in-session transformation.
Fits with the icing on the cake idea for hypnosis.
Yeah.
The core change happens internally. And symptoms themselves, anxiety, phobias, etc., how are they framed?
They're seen as the outward signs, the manifestations of the deeper problem, the underlying conclusions, beliefs, adaptations.
So you don't just treat the symptom.
No, the focus isn't symptom suppression. It's resolving the root cause. The belief is fix the underlying structure, and the symptoms will likely diminish or disappear as a natural consequence. They're signposts to the real issue.
Got it. Go deeper than the surface complaint. Now, safety is paramount. What if a client has an unexpected, maybe overwhelming reaction during hypnosis, an abreaction? How does ACH advise handling that?
Yeah, it's rare, but possible. Eimer's guidance is clear. Therapist stays calm, centered, no physical touch. Use a firm but soothing voice to gently guide the person back to full awareness. Focus them on external senses, what they see, hear, feel right now in the room. Grounding them is key.
Calm, reassuring guidance back to the present. Makes sense.
Yeah.
She draws a line between organic and forced hypnosis. What's that distinction about?
ACH really emphasizes letting the process unfold organically from the client's unconscious, trusting their inner wisdom to guide the session.
As opposed
To forced techniques where the therapist might rigidly apply a specific script or protocol based only on the symptom without really tuning into the client's unique moment-to-moment experience. The idea is the client's unconscious knows where it needs to go. Don't force it down a preset path.
trust the client's process.
Yeah.
That really reinforces the client-centered feel. Okay, one last practical point. The talkative client. We all know people who can talk a lot. How does ACH handle that in session?
Emir suggests excessive talking often means the client is stuck in their conscious, analytical mind, maybe avoiding deeper stuff.
So what's the technique?
The therapist listens intently, but when they spot one of those crucial unconscious moments, a hesitation, a shift in tone, a key phrase hinting at something deeper, they politely but firmly interrupt.
Interrupt.
Gently, yes. And redirect the focus onto that specific moment, that word, that feeling, that nonverbal cue.
So use the interruption to zero in on the important stuff hidden in the chatter.
Exactly. The goal is to kind of train the client to communicate more concisely, more connected to their unconscious experience. Guide them towards the nuggets, not just the stream.
Find the gold in the river of words. Okay.
Precisely. Guiding them to what holds the most potential for insight.
Well, this has been incredibly illuminating, really diving deep into advanced conversational hypnosis, especially seeing it alongside Ericksonian ideas through Virginie Eimer's perspective. It's so clear ACH offers this distinct approach, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That focus on the client's unique perception, using those subtle unconscious moments, facilitating change organically. It's a powerful combination.
Yeah, and it really paints a picture of therapy that could be, well, maybe more efficient. Faster results for practitioners, perhaps.
Potentially, yes. And for clients, the promise is deeper, more lasting change because you're addressing those root patterns, not just papering over cracks.
It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? How much our unconscious patterns run the show, and how a different kind of conversation might unlock solutions we didn't even know we had.
It really does. And maybe that's the thought to leave our listeners with. Just consider, how might becoming more attuned to the subtle language of the unconscious in yourself and others change things? Not just in therapy, but in everyday life, communication, self-awareness.
That idea that the answers might already be inside us.
Yeah, just waiting for the right kind of conversation, the right kind of attention to bring them to the surface. Maybe the deepest dives are the ones we take within ourselves.
A powerful thought. And we definitely encourage everyone listening to keep exploring these ideas. We've really only scratched the surface today of advanced conversational hypnosis.
There's always so much more to learn about the mind.
Absolutely. Thanks for tuning in to this deep dive.